Mamata Banerjee has decided to ban the Kerala story. Remember, earlier today, Mamata Banerjee had also spoken about the movie, calling it nothing but propaganda.
I was shocked to hear the story of 19-year-old Yasmina, married first at the age of 13. As successive husbands were killed, she married 6 times in 6 years to 4 foreigners and 2 Syrians. If she was shocked at my appearance, I was shocked to hear the story of 19-year-old Yasmina, married first at the age of 13. As successive husbands were killed, she married 6 times in 6 years to 4 foreigners and 2 Syrians.
لا أنا هذا الشيء يعني كان يعني أسوي السنة يعني هيك هذه السنة يعني عشان هذا كله في سبيل الله هي في سبيل الله يعني يستشهد واحد الزواج واحد.
Yasmina believes the pain in her womb and persistent vaginal bleeding is caused by American bombing. All the women I met were angry about the attacks on the Caliphate, where they said life was good. What's really striking talking to these women is how much they still adhere to the Islamic State. Many of them have fled from town to town to town under bombing. They've seen the most terrible things in war, and yet they are true believers. It's going to take a lot to get them to change their minds. How hard it is to understand the power of belief and the way fanatical leaders get their followers to love the chains that hold them captive.
ISIS has been declared defeated, but what about the thousands of fighters and wives of those insurgents that remain in what was left of the so-called Caliphate? Many of them now in camps or in jails being held by the people they once tormented. Our James Longman traveled to the region and met some of them, former Americans who sided with ISIS and now want to return to the U.S. but can't.
In a cold corner of northwest Iraq, Maqbula Bajo is still homeless. She's Yazidi, part of a community enslaved and murdered by ISIS. She was taken from her home and kept as a slave for 2 years.
In front of our eyes, they killed them all. My father, uncles, our relatives, my father's uncles. They blindfolded the youth and tied their hands and took them near the river. We heard them being shot.
She feels she's been forgotten by the world. While many victims have yet to find peace, many of those who joined ISIS have yet to see justice. Just over the border in Syria, another group of women live in another camp. But these are the ones who married into the ISIS cult, and their surroundings seem much more comfortable.
These are blankets from the UN. We took a mat and we grouped together and have coffee here in the evening to try to talk together to help one another.
In Roj camp, Kimberly Pullman is trying to seem normal.
James.
It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Kimberly.
She's a US-Canadian woman who joined ISIS in 2015. Now, like thousands of others, she's in a camp waiting for one of the nations she left to take her back. The tent, which she shares with British ISIS woman Shamima Begum, is nothing like I've seen in Syria. Satellite TV, heating, even little mementos of home. A stark contrast to the hellish conditions most refugees endure. Pullman is keen to show she's not radicalised, not a threat. She blames her time in ISIS on her husband.
And how did you meet?
We met online and he was a really vibrant, very alive, very knowledgeable, very relaxed kind of human being. Certainly not what you would have expected if you think of the word terrorist.
Like many of those who joined from the West, Pullman was recruited online. And despite this, like so many others, she denies seeing their crimes before leaving to join them.
I was asked, didn't you see the beheading videos? The problem is that in North America, every time I clicked on any links, they weren't there anymore. So no, to be honest with you, I didn't see them, and I don't have Cablevision. Yes.
An argument that's difficult to believe, but Pullman appears to have rationalised her actions, not only to convince others, but perhaps also herself. She's one of thousands of men, women and children left over from the so-called ISIS Caliphate. After the fall of Baghouz a year ago, the apocalyptic end to ISIS's reign of terror, thousands were taken into custody. We witnessed truckloads of some of the most hardened families driven away to an uncertain future. Lines of ISIS fighters sat out in the cold, awaiting their fate. But now, a year later, in camps and prisons across northeast Syria, these people remain in detention and no formal sentencing is in sight. Pullman's camp is nothing like the main tented city at Al-Hol, where appalling conditions are entrenching radicalization. Entire areas are no-go zones for aid agencies for fear of being attacked. Over 65,000, about a quarter from the west, wait for a resolution, and half are children.
You can see children, they'll take a doll and they'll behead the doll. It's very, very frightening, actually, to see what children can be taught to do.
Hodomathana is another US woman and Pullman's neighbor. Her decision to join ISIS now implicates her 2-year-old son, Adam.
Look at me. Look at that cheese.
Stripped from a normal life, paying for his mother's crimes. I first met her a year ago, shortly after the Trump administration revoked her citizenship, despite the fact that she was born in New Jersey. She's now appealing for a third time.
I was forced to get married because it was either that or no way out.
Is there a world in which you let Adam go back to the States and you stay here?
I would let him go, yeah. I would prefer him going back as soon as possible, even if it's without me, but I know it's going to be very hard, yeah. Take it? Okay.
The women cast themselves as Westerners trapped in a world of terror.
So, because I think a lot of people at home might think to themselves, well, you know, ISIS is over. These people are saying that they're sorry. You don't think ISIS is over?
Oh, no, I wish. Not at all. They put out audios just recently again. They've told us that they're coming for us. We live in fear of that.
There is a sense of victimhood in the way she speaks. But the real victims of ISIS are the many thousands who died, the women enslaved and raped, the gay men thrown from roofs. ISIS evil did not discriminate. At the height of its reign in 2016, the terror group took advantage of a vacuum left by the Syrian civil war and conquered huge swathes of territory across Syria and Iraq. Thousands of extremists flocked from around the world. Western and local hostages were publicly executed as a form of twisted entertainment. The Yazidi community suffered unimaginable horror.
They established a bazaar for selling Yazidi girls in Raqqa and El Naim roundabout, which was called Girls Bazaar, so whoever needed a girl, he could go there and buy. It was very hard for us as Yazidis to be treated like that. Every girl had her picture and name on her neck in that bazaar being sold and bought. Their prices were also written. Some of the girls were rented for one day.
And she holds the wives responsible too.
They were also the wives of ISIS members. They treated us worse than their husbands did to us. Those ISIS women were holding Yazidi girls for their husbands to rape them and torture them. They are ISIS wives. We want them to be punished too.
I'm just trying to explain to you that it's a very emotive issue. And of course, ISIS committed some of the most heinous acts I think it's possible.
They did. We're still finding out things that they did, and we're in shock even finding out what they did because we didn't even know.
But it's interesting how you say they rather than... Because I think people at home will think that, well, you were ISIS, you joined ISIS.
Never. I wasn't before I came. It was known. They tried to kill me there because I wouldn't conform.
What would you say to people watching who will look at your situation and will look at this? I mean, this is much nicer than most of the other, or any other tent I think I've ever been in Syria. Really? And say, you don't deserve this. This is, you married into ISIS. Your punishment is to stay there and to rot.
I'd say that's a very dangerous way of thinking. These people put me in prison too. They tried to kill me too. So you have to realize that we all have different stories.